Strategic priorities. So we have this thing called the strategic sourcing matrix. It's another 2x2 square, which you will see throughout your business career. For some reason, they like the 2x2 squares. So let's go ahead and dive into this. So here's what it looks like. So we have on the left-hand side, from bottom to top, we have importance of the category. So the least important to the most important. This could be based on the volume or the total cost of the materials or some other category, other criteria that make it more or less important. And on the bottom here, from left to right, we have our complexity of the market. So this could be high risk, rapid technology changes, or high entry barriers. If something is extremely complex and very important, it's considered critical. It's in the upper left-hand side. But if it's low risk and not that important, it's probably in the routine, which is the lower left, and the critical is in the upper right. But then we also have leverage and bottleneck. So all of these we'll dive more into in just a few minutes. When you look at this, when you look at the critical importance, how much do you spend on each category? If you were to look at it and say, well, leverage, routine, critical, bottleneck, where do you think you would land with your purchases? How important is the input to the product image or the customer satisfaction? How important is that to you? Or how important might that be for someone who's doing the purchase? And then we have the complexity of the supplier market. How many potential suppliers are there? Are they smaller than your firm, larger than your firm, or are they the same size as your firm? We ask that question because if we're bigger than our supplier, they might do some things to keep us happy because we are bigger than them. We're a big fish. Where if we are smaller than our supplier, they might not consider us that big of a player and might not give us as many deals because we're a small fish. And if we're the same size, well, we can negotiate on the same level. So our next question here is, how risky is the market? Is it extremely risky with price fluctuations, or is the market pretty steady? For example, oil. We could look at the oil history, and right now oil is near some of the lowest it's ever been. But just a few years ago, it was making records. So how risky is this market? And how fast does technology change? So if we're looking at, for example, cell phone technology, well, we recently had 5G cell phone technology come out. Well, 4G is not that old of a technology, and before that we had 3G. So that's an example of a technology change. Another technology change could be screen resolution, maybe memory size, the speed of the chips in the cell phones. How fast does this technology change? It really depends on what you're considering. All right, so we're going to dive a little bit into each of these four categories here. So critical. So we buy large volumes of complex, high-risk supplier from our suppliers. And our suppliers are somewhat unique, meaning they are very specialized in what they do. So these critical items must be sourced correctly. So we need to work closely with our suppliers and think of long-term partnerships. We need to think of the partnerships, because if we do transactional, where we just call them when we need them, well, we might not be a priority for them. So when it becomes a critical need for us to have this item, we might not be a priority for them. So leverage here. So we're going to buy large volumes from competitive, low-risk supplier markets. For example, if you were trying to source projectors, and we're trying to outfit the entire university, that's a lot of projectors, because almost every classroom has a projector on campus. Well, we're buying a lot of them, so we have a large volume, and there's so many different projector companies out there. There's Infocus, Panasonic, Samsung, LG. Just you keep naming them and they're there. So it's relatively low risk for a company to enter the market also. So we can leverage our spending power because our suppliers fear the competition. So they'll be more willing to negotiate, especially because we're buying large volume. So we can really make up a lot of ground when we're leveraging our buys on this category. The bottleneck. So small volume, but complex high risk items. These are things that if we do not have, operations stop. Think about a hospital doesn't have electricity, or a hospital doesn't have a certain type of medical instrument for surgery. Well, if they don't have that item for surgery, those surgeries might not happen. So those are high risk because if you have an emergency surgery that needs that tool, but the hospital may not buy a whole lot of them, so they're small, but they're highly complex. So suppliers are unique. So there might be only a handful of suppliers that actually have these products. So these items, if you don't have them, cause bottlenecks. So we need to make sure that we maintain our inventory and keep the price steady. So that way we can maintain an inflow of these items to make sure we don't run into that bottleneck. And then finally, we have our routine. These are our everyday purchases. Small volumes, competitive, low-risk supplier markets. So think of office supplies. Those are just routine purchases. So we're buying these. It's just a push of a button. We go onto a supplier's website, do a couple clicks, and hit buy. Really, there's nothing else to it. We're buying the price that's on the screen, or buying the price that's on the shelf. And really, when it comes to these type of items, it's not worth our effort to try to negotiate individual items. But when we negotiate a category, such as the category of office supplies, it might be worth negotiating office supplies and not negotiating copy paper, if that makes sense to you. All right, so we have several factors that define our complexity. So our supply market landscape. Are there many suppliers or only a few? Can new suppliers enter the market easily? And are the supplier size? Are they bigger, smaller, or the same size as our company? So all of these factors we're looking at our supplier. But then we're looking at the risk next. How important of a customer are we to that supplier? Are we the big fish for them where they're going to do everything they can to keep us happy? Or are they just going to give us the standard 1-800 number where we just call in to place our order? Now, if we're the big fish, we probably have somebody's home phone number or cell phone number, so when we make the phone call, we get the same person every time we call. We have a dedicated account executive, where if we're small, we might not have that type of service. So, and what other forces are influencing us to obtain a reliable source of supply? Is it because the item is maybe a bottleneck? Or maybe it's a rare item that only a couple companies can make? Or is it so specialized? Or is it because of the quality level we need? You know, all these different factors play a role. Is it maybe because of where in the world we're sourcing it from? So our technological uniqueness. The pace of technology change affects our decision-making certainty. When we buy products, we're fairly certain that that product's going to last a certain period of time. But when we go further and we're looking at it, do we know if that product is going to last 2 years? Think of the Apple iPhone. It seems like every year they're coming out with a new model. So if you're going to outfit your team with iPhones, are you planning to buy a new phone every year for your team? Or is the plan to buy one phone and then maybe in 3 years replace that, or 2 years? You know, what's the plan? And then you want to evaluate each item based on the importance and the complexity. Is having the latest iPhone because you want your people to look like they're successful? Or is it just because of some feature that phone has? All these different things make that product that you're looking for unique. So we have different priorities, as you've seen already. We have routine, leverage, bottleneck, and then critical. Critical is also known as strategic. So routine, just keep it simple. Keep it simple and straightforward, that KISS method. Leverage, we're looking at large volumes from stable markets. We're going to analyze our spend. We're going to reduce our supplier base to instead of having 100 different suppliers, maybe have 10 suppliers. And we're going to look globally. See if maybe there's a better part of the world where we can get a good price and good quality. The bottleneck, we need to definitely keep our eyes on these items, because yes, we're only ordering a small volume of them, but these are critical to our operations and our manufacturing. So we might get into a purchasing consortium where we're purchasing with other companies. We may only need 5, and that's going to last us 3 years, but the company will only sell in quantities of 50. Well, and they're not willing to sell 5 at a time, so we might need to partner with other companies to put in one order that at least meets that minimum 50. And then everybody gets a better price because it's 50. And then you get your 5 and everybody gets what they need. So we need to collaborate and get the partnership developed. And the critical. So these are complex, high volume and high value items. They're our customer of choice. We are their customer of choice. Long-term contracts. These are the contracts that we partner with them for 10, 20 years. And we build trust to get up to that point. That's paying our bills on time. That's giving them everything they need to fill our orders, like our quality standards, and not changing it in the middle of their manufacturing where they're going to have to scrap half of it because we've changed the standard. We have to build that trust. What does it take to get your trust? Think of how would you do that? How do you get to trust somebody? So we have a couple types of spend that all this is going to get into. So not all buys are created equal. Some purchases will warrant more of your time and effort than others. Think about that. You're probably going to spend a lot more time on the critical and leverage than you're going to do on the routine. So the strategic sourcing matrix can help you think about this. What are you going to prioritize? And then all buys need to be purposeful, meaning they improve your company's competitive position. Just because somebody wants something doesn't mean they should get it. Now, this of course depends on your position in the company. But if you have a question on why you should be ordering something, talk to your manager, talk to your supervisor. And then they can bring that up to whoever it is. And maybe there's a different product that will actually improve your company's position that the person who gave the requisition to you didn't know about. I've done that a few times myself. And it's all about knowing what you're sourcing. So this is just a highlight of our strategic priorities and that strategic sourcing matrix. The book is going to go over a lot more in detail, but we're going to go over the types of spend, because all these 4 categories do have types of spending within them. And depending on what the type of spend, we'll show what categories it goes in. So our next video is going to be on the types of spend.